first episode of The Pescatarian and the Pig. Today we're going to be making Brandy spiked chocolate eggnog cake. This was my most popular recipe that I posted onto my blog last year, and it was featured on WordPress.com on Freshly Pressed. And it's a little bit complicated, so I thought it might be helpful to show you how it's done. So, first we need a cup of butter. And I like to use unsalted butter because then it doesn't mess with my salt ratio when I add the salt later in the recipe. So we'll put 2 sticks of butter into my mixer. Butter gets really messy and greasy, and it's going to be all over my hands now. Alright. Then we need 1 3/4 cup white sugar. So, I'm a little bit lazy sometimes when it comes to mixing these things in the stand mixer because it's so easy, and I like to just add in the sugar and the butter together, and this machine will do all the rest for me. If you're using a hand mixer, it's wiser to start creaming the butter and add the sugar as you're going. So, here we go. Going to set it on a low setting. We'll let that butter cream with the sugar. Make sure you used softened butter to cream your butter and sugar together. When I soften my butter, sometimes I leave it out overnight, although I'm notorious for accidentally leaving it in the fridge too long, in which case you can just pop it in the microwave for 10 to 20 seconds and you'll have softened butter. Now, next, the recipe calls for 3 eggs, and I have a proud little friend who's going to share her eggs with us. Come here. This is Banana Sandwich. She is my duck, and she was actually born here on the farm in this kitchen. And she is an egg layer. So Banana, do you think you got 3 eggs for us? Oh, thank you. There you go, we got 3 eggs from Banana. Thank you very much. We'll send you on your merry little way. Alright, now after holding a farm animal, I'm going to make sure that I go over and I wash my hands. Right, so now that I've washed my hands, we're going to go with the next step, which is to add these 3 eggs one at a time. So add the egg, and set up your mixer. Usually I leave that going while I prepare the dry ingredients, but right now I'm going to prepare the dry ingredients for you. I have pre-measured 2½ cups of flour into this bowl, and I'm going to add 6 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder. My favorite is Ghirardelli. I don't really know why, but that's the one I like to use the best. So we got 6 tablespoons. 3. Then we're going to need baking powder. This will help your cake rise. We're doing 1½ teaspoons. 1½ teaspoons. Alright. Then you'll need 1 teaspoon of sea salt. You can use table salt if you want to. I like to use sea salt the best, and I use the fine sea salt for this. If you were gonna top brownies or something with sea salt, people usually use the coarsely ground kind. It adds that nice little flavor. But for this, we're going to use finely ground sea salt, 1 teaspoon. Okay. And then we're going to do 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Accidentally pulled up my nutmeg. So, do some freshly ground cinnamon. Pop that in there. And this, you can sift these ingredients together. You don't have to. I like to just use my little piggy whisk. and I just whisk them together like this. There's not really a science to this one, so just whisk it all up until you feel like it's mixed well enough. So then what we're going to do is we're going to prepare our milk. And it calls for 1 3/4 cup of milk, and I like to use whole milk because it adds a little bit more flavor. So here we go. I'm going to measure out just a cup. And then we're going to, I like to use a measuring cup to do this, but we need to alternate back and forth adding this dry mixture and the milk, and that'll keep it going. So here we go. Turn your mixer on. And I like to add the last bit of my milk and my flour mixture with the lid up, and also it would be wise to scrape down the sides of your bowl with a spatula at this point, as the dry ingredients, they tend to cake up around the edge of the bowl. So get mixed in and off of the beater that you've got on your mixer, which you've got flour everywhere. Then I'll add the last of the flour. Off my beater or my spatula. Alright. And then put that back on low speed and add the rest of your milk. Once I've added all of the milk and the dry ingredients together, that's when I add my 1½ teaspoons of vanilla. Use pure vanilla extract and make sure that you mix it in very well. Once this is all mixed in, I like to remove the bowl from the machine. That helps me because I'm going to be adding in chocolate chips, and that'll help me so that my hands and everything aren't in the way of the machine. So I lift the machine, and using my spatula again, I'm going to get as much batter off of my beater as I can. Right now we're going to add chocolate chips. We're adding a ½ cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips, and I'm going to stir that in using my handy dandy pig spatula. So just stir it in and mix it as well as you can. Alright, got it all mixed in there. Looks good. Push my machine aside. Then we're gonna need 3 cake plates, or cake. We're gonna need 3 cake pans. We're gonna use 3 9-inch cake pans. Put them right here. And my cake pans are non-stick, but I like to put the butter in them anyway because I've never really had as much luck as I think you should with non-stick items. So what I do is I always kind of reserve the last bit of butter from things when I haven't used it all up, and I put it in the fridge, and then I just use it as like a little stick, and I put it all over the pan. So as you can see, I'm just buttering it liberally. Your oven should be preheated by now to 350 degrees. Put some wrapper in there. Okay. Now we're going to pour this batter as evenly as we can between the 3 cake pans. So just pour it out. I sort of go a little timidly on it at the beginning, and then make sure I even it out at the end to make sure I don't overdo one of them. Of course, if they're not perfectly even, it's not a big deal. Then spread it evenly along the bottom of the cake pans. And they won't fill it up very much. They're going to make kind of short layers, but then again, the baking powder will make it puff. So don't worry about it if they look like shallow little cakes. Our last one here. Alright, now we're going to go and we're going to take these to the oven. Alright, so we've got all 3 cakes prepared in the pans and we're going to put them in the oven. You can utilize both racks for this. Set your timer to 25 minutes. Alright, while those are baking, this is when I like to prepare the eggnog custard. So, to prepare the eggnog custard, I've gotten out a saucepan and a nice whisk. We're going to use 4 cups of eggnog. Luckily, these eggnog cases of eggnog you get at the grocery store actually are 4 cups worth of eggnog. So, pre-measured right there makes it so much easier. Just open up my eggnog, pour it in my saucepan. Let's get a lot. A lot of stuff. Alright. So, you have 4 cups of eggnog. We've got a 1/2 cup of white sugar. Mix that in. Then you're going to want to put the stove onto a high heat. You mix it really nicely and continue to mix consistently while it's heating up. Once it heats up, it'll come to a boil, and when it comes to a boil, you'll be able to sort of leave it as it goes, but make sure it doesn't overflow the pan, and if it starts to rise, you can lower your heat a little bit. Just keep it boiling so that it'll keep moving and it won't get burnt. Now, one step that is a little tiny bit complicated, so I'm going to show you how to fix that right now. You're going to add 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour to the custard, but if you add it by itself, it'll just be a lumpy mess. So what I do is I like to pre-measure out the 2 tablespoons of flour into a measuring cup. Then I take another measuring cup and I just spoon a little bit of the eggnog mixture into the flour mixture. Then using your whisk, you whisk that together and it becomes like a pasty little doughy mess. It kind of looks like pancake mixture. But once you get that all settled in there, get all mixed up, that'll wet the flour and it'll keep the flour from floating and turning into lumps and all that stuff inside of your mixture. So do that, you scrape that into the mixture, keep it moving. Alright, here you go. And at the end, once it's boiled and it's really cooked through, you're going to want to add, one of the last steps is to add 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. But don't add that until it's almost finished. Lucky for you, I have pre-prepared all of this. So I have 3 cakes ready to go. They're over here on the cooling rack, one's still in the pan, and I actually already have the custard sitting in the refrigerator. You're going to want to refrigerate the custard or let it cool before you try to put it on the cake, otherwise it'll just be soupy and it won't be thickened up yet. So let me grab my custard and grab my cakes and we'll be right back over on that counter. Alright, our next step is to make the Brandy buttercream frosting. So, in your electric mixer, you're going to put a 1/2 cup of unsalted butter. Oops. And to this you're going to add 4 cups of powdered sugar. Now, with the powdered sugar, I like to add a little bit at the beginning, and then as it wets, add a little bit more, but we're also going to be doing a back and forth with a half cup of milk. So if it starts to get too dry, you add a little bit of milk. Starts to get too wet, you add a little sugar. That's how we're going to do it. We're also going to add our vanilla at the beginning. So we need a teaspoon of vanilla. Okay, then we're going to pre-measure a half teaspoon of sea salt. And I'm going to add this in once I start adding the powdered sugar. Right. So we're going to start our mixer. Before I add my final cup of sugar, I'm going to add the most important part, which you can leave out if you want to, but I don't know why you would want to, is going to be a 4th cup of brandy. So you're going to want to purchase some good brandy. That's good brandy. And pour yourself a 4th cup and pour it into your froster. It smells really good. Okay, you start mixing it up again and add your last cup of sugar. I'm going to scrape down the sides of the bowl. One of the important things about this particular recipe and why you want to add the brandy before you add your last cup of sugar is because what happened here, which sometimes happens and sometimes not, the frosting has actually ended up a bit soupier than what we're going for. So now what to do is you take the reserve. I have not used the entire half cup of milk yet. And what you're going to do is you're going to add a cup of powdered sugar to thicken it. If that's not thick enough, you add a little bit more sugar. If it becomes too thick, just add a little bit more milk. It's a pretty easily manipulated batch of frosting. So if it looks a little runny to you right now, don't worry about it. Just have some extra powdered sugar on hand. I'm going to add another cup. So that makes 5 cups now. We'll see how that turns out. Okay, now that our frosting is all set, we're going to start to assemble the cake. So we're going to take one layer of the cake. We're going to set it down as the bottom layer. Make it a little more obvious. And I'm going to take out some frosting, and I'm going to fill a piping bag with the frosting. I'm going to do this so that I can create a little ledge around the cake, and then I'm going to fill the middle of the cake with the eggnog custard, which I have already prepared in the refrigerator, and that'll keep it from just oozing out the sides when you stick on the next layer of cake. So let's take some of this amazing frosting. Seriously, is there like anything better than alcohol spiked dessert? It's like, give me some. Okay, take out my thing. I like to fold my piping bag like this, and then it makes it easier just to slap some in there, and you work it down to the bottom. You're not going to use a whole lot of the frosting, just enough to make the ledge, because we're going to need the frosting to frost the cake afterwards. So a couple of little spoonfuls in there. Twist it up, work the frosting down. It doesn't truly matter what tip you have on your piping bag, but I use the large star tip because it just makes a bigger amount come out, and it's a little easier for me to use. So you're going to create a ledge of frosting like this. Then open up your eggnog mixture. And this is like a nice thick, ooh, it's gotten really thick. This is a nice thick cold pudding. So you just plop it in the center. Plop about half of the mixture. You might end up with eggnog mixture left over depending on how much you're comfortable putting on the cake. If you put too much, it starts to get slippery, slidey, and all the layers fall off. So I kind of like to slap it in the middle and then spread it out. I don't let it touch the frosting because when you put the next layer of cake on, it'll smush it out further. So still leave a little ledge between the eggnog custard and the frosting and put it on there nice and thick. Alright, then I'm going to take a second layer of the cake and I'm going to plop that right on top. Now something I like to do, which you may choose to do, may choose not to do, just to make it sure that it stays secure, I sometimes will take toothpicks, and I'll just take 3 toothpicks, line the cake up nicely, and I'll just secure them right through the 2 pieces of cake like that. Alright, before you put it in the fridge though, you're going to want to make the brandy glaze, and I have pre-made that. It's just some hot water, some brandy, and some powdered sugar mixed together. So what I do here is I do another circle around the cake. The toothpicks are sort of within the cake, so they'll be easily removed. So you make a nice border again around the cake. And make sure it's sealed. Then you're going to take your brandy glaze and you're going to pour it into the middle slowly, and it will start soaking in. And this cake has a lot of little holes in it, and it'll fall into the holes. If you're having trouble getting it to soak in, you can take toothpicks or skewers and just poke a bunch of holes in there, and that'll make a little bit more sponginess for it to soak into. So you pour that in there. It's got this nice little border on it so it's not getting all over the plate. And then you stick this in the fridge. So put this in the fridge for about 10 minutes. When you take it out again, you're going to add another layer of this custard mixture on top of this second layer, and then you're going to put the third layer on top. What I've done is I've pre-made a cake, and I've assembled all of the layers together, and I've added a crumb coat on the outside. The crumb coat is just sort of a thin layer of frosting that'll keep your cake from flaking off into a bunch of crumbs when you add your final layer of frosting. It'll just make it look a lot nicer. And also, the longer your cake has been in the refrigerator, the more stable it'll feel. So let me grab that. Here we go. Here's the cake from the fridge. I actually have toothpicks still in this one, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull the toothpicks out. I do really like to use the toothpicks to secure the cake together, and after you do the crumb coat, the frosting helps secure it a little bit better, but it can be slippy slidey because of the custard, so securing it until the final point is always a good idea. So now I'm just going to take my frosting, and if you want, you can use an offset spatula. I don't have an offset spatula, and to my knowledge, most people don't, unless you're very serious about cake decorating, which I am not a master of cake decorating, but I like to do it anyway. Don't worry about if your cake doesn't turn out looking perfect. It'll taste really good. So I'm going to take some of my frosting and I'm going to apply a liberal amount on the top. I have a cake spatula, so we're going to say that works for now. Alright, and I've actually, just note that I have prepared some of the frosting already in a piping bag so that I can decorate the edges. So if you want to use any icing in the piping bag and decorate edges or anything like that, it would be wise to do it beforehand, then you know how much you have to work with at the end. So I'm just going to spread frosting on the top of the plate. I also don't have a rotating cake stand, but the good old power of my hand lets me rotate it on my own. So I put it on rather thick so that it covers all of the cake. Then I'm going to put it on the sides. Just dress up the sides with a big old wads of frosting. Whoops. Don't worry about getting messy. Alright. Going to just take what I got. I'm going to work it around the cake. It's just really important at this point to cover all of the sides of the cake, but at the moment it's more important just to cover everything than to get everything looking good. So first, of course, try to hide any gaps in the frosting where you might see cake poking through. Alright, so I've got the frosting all over the cake, and I'm going to try to even out the top just a little bit. I don't worry about having it perfect because I actually really like the way it looks when it's a little fluffy and the frosting has a little more texture into it. So what you do is smooth out the top a little bit. Again, I'm going to leave it so it's kind of, marked and sort of painted looking. Then what this will do is it sort of pushes the frosting over the edges a little bit, which is nice because then you just take your spatula and you rub around the edges and just get a nice clean edge around the whole cake. Just pull that out. Now what I've strategically done is I've put, what I've strategically done is I've put this cake onto a cake plate that's not very much bigger than the cake, and that saves me the step of having to clean off the cake plate before I add the piping. Something you can do, which some people do, is they put a little bit of wax paper around underneath the cake so that when you frost it and you're done frosting before you add the decoration, you can just pull the wax paper out and your cake plate will be clean. And also you can go around and wipe it down with a towel or a paper towel or whatever, but since mine is almost the size of the cake, I'm just going to skip that step altogether, and I'm going to decorate the outer edges of the cake using my pastry bag filled with the frosting and the star tip. And I promise you, I am not a master cake decorator, so I'm just going to do a simple little sploop, I don't even know what they're called, of frosting, and it's just going to have a nice little shape to it, and I'm going to do it while I turn my cake stand. So here we go. So there you go. Now my cake is finished. I'm going to put it in the refrigerator and I'm just going to let it set for about 10 minutes before I cut it. Then we're going to cut it and we'll see how good it looks inside. Alright, so now we've had this sitting in the fridge for 10 minutes. And just as an extra little garnish, I've cut a clip off of one of my holly trees out front and stuck it on top with some berries. It just looks cute for presentation purposes. Of course, when you serve it, you're not going to want to serve anybody any holly or berries. So you take your cake knife or whatever knife you have to cut a cake with, and we're going to cut a piece so that we can see how nice the inside of this cake looks. Whoops, got it stuck to my knife. So you see the inside of the cake there, you see it here. It's got all the delicious eggnog layers. That center layer is soaked in the brandy glaze. and then it's covered in Brandy buttercream sauce. So, if you don't mind if I lick that, I am going to bring my dearest friend Cupcake in here, and she's going to have a little bite of a cake. We'll see if she approves. Before I get her in here, I'm going to taste it myself, because I know it's good. That's a really good cake. Alright. Cuppy!
Cuppy, you want to try some cake? Come here. Come here, sweetie. Can you sit? Come here. Come here. Will you sit? Sit. Good girl. Be gentle. Be gentle. Good girl. You love that cake. Do you like that cake? She's a little bit dirty, but that's okay. She looks pretty with her ribbon on. Can you sit again? Have a sit. Good sit. Good girl. You show everybody your beautiful face. You show everybody how much you love this cake. Look. Look at the camera. There you go.
Thanks for coming to the Pescatarian and the Pig, and we'll have more recipes for you soon.